So you want to know how to rehabilitate your shoulder injury, or even better, bulletproof your shoulders so that you never get injured. Well, in this episode, I am going to show you the most amazing beginner routine, and make sure you stick around right to the end because I'm going to give you the biggest mistake that people get wrong when rehabilitating their shoulders. All that and more coming up.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.
Hey everyone, in case we haven't met, my name's Rad Burmeister. I'm one of the co-founders of Unity Gym and the co-creators of the UMS, formerly known as the FMS, where we teach you how to nourish and move instead of diet and exercise. And this week, I am talking all about shoulder rehabilitation and prehabilitation and bulletproofing your shoulders. It's something that I would consider myself a bit of an expert in now, considering that I've just rehabilitated a slap tear with a torn supraspinatus and also a whole bunch of other nasties in my right shoulder, degenerative joint diseases and things like that. All stuff that just happens to you as you get older when you've had such an active life as me. But we've come up with a really, really good strategy and it works really well. And I worked with one of Australia's best physiotherapists to create this strategy. And now I'm sharing it with you. And this week we are going to, well, I am, my brother's not here, obviously I'm on my own. But this week I am, hey Ferrero, how's it going, brother? I am going to be taking you through 4 periodizations of this program. So going from an absolute beginner, rehab level, or even prehab, even if you don't have an injury, and then going up through the levels into a much more advanced rehabilitation right at the end of rehabilitation, going into full-on shoulder strengthening. So that's what's going to be happening this week. And then in Friday, we're going to give away some really cool stuff for where do you go after rehab, okay? So what's happening? So Richie's had to move the mic there. So let's have a quick look. I've got to look at my notes here so I can remember. It's so much easier when Yanni's here because we just bounce off each other, and when one of us forgets something, the other one reminds each other. But when it's just me, I've got to always look at my notes to make sure I go through everything. So the key insight that I want you guys to take away from this. So if you take nothing away from this entire show or this entire week, this is the key insight for you. At the most basic level of shoulder rehabilitation and conditioning for, I'd say 80 or 90% of shoulder injuries is scapular stabilization strength and rotator cuff strength. At the most basic level, that's what your strategy is and that's what you're doing. What do I mean by scapular stabilizers? The muscles that stabilize the scapula and keep it down in place, stop it from winging, stop it from protracting or elevating when you're trying to do movements where you want to keep the shoulder nice and stable, and also rotator cuff strength. And that's what we're going to do now. So let's get out on the gym floor. I'm going to show you the most basic stuff. Now, hey Kai, how are you, brother? Good to see you. And Yanni, Yanni's commenting as Unity Gym. So hi, Yanni. Now, what I want to say is quickly as well, I can see we've got a whole bunch of viewers. Give me a sing out. Let me know where you're from so that I know who I'm talking to. But even more importantly, I'm going to go out on the gym floor now. I'm not going to be able to see any interaction here. When I come back, I want to see some questions. Anything that you guys want to know about shoulder conditioning, shoulder rehab, or the routine that I'm about to do, please post a question, because when I get back in here, I'm going to answer every one of your questions, and I'm also going to give you the biggest mistake that people make, and I really hope to see some good questions. So don't be shy. Let me know who you are. Let me know where you're watching from, and give me some questions. Let's get out on the gym floor. Coffee makes everything better, doesn't it? So, what we're going to do, basically every program that I do in this week, each day is going to be a new periodized program, which you would do anywhere from, I'd say with shoulder rehab, anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. And each one is going to increase in intensity, increase in volume, and increase in complexity, which means intensity, I'm going to be lifting more weight or making it harder. Complexity, I'm going to be doing a harder variation, a more complex exercise. And what did I say? Intensity, complexity, and volume. More sets or more reps, okay? So, for the first thing, this is at the most basic level, scapular stabilization. So what I'm going to do, I'll stand side on so you can see me here. And this is what I do at the start of every single workout since I've been rehabilitating my shoulders. Even my lower body workouts, you do this every single day. So for me, that's 6 days a week. I always have one day where the only thing I do is mobility training or flexibility. So what I'm going to do, I'll take my top shirt off here so that my bottom shirt is one of those compression shirts, so you'll be able to see what's going on in my shoulders a little bit better. So what I'm looking for here is scapular retraction and depression. So I'm pulling my scapula back and down. We do not want the scapula elevating or protracting when you do this. So what I'm going to do, there's 4 things. The first thing, I'm going to put the ball at shoulder height. So in the notes of this video, you can see scapular activate. This is not any particular name for this exercise, I'm just describing it. So I think in the notes Yanni wrote scapular stabilization with hand at shoulder height. So that's what this means. Hand is at shoulder height. We're going to progress this through complexity over these videos. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to full on, watch what happens to my shoulder. I'm going to retract and depress. So full on retraction and depression. And then I'm going to go from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Okay? Whilst keeping the elbow straight. If I'm doing this and bending my arm, I'm doing the wrong thing. If I come back and I start moving and then my shoulder moves forward like that, see now my shoulder's protracted. So if you watch my scapula, that's wrong. So retraction, so I'm pushing in against the wall. Depression, locked out elbow going from 9 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Okay? Now, when you start, you do as many reps as you can, but the goal is to get up to 60 reps, okay? The next one, exactly the same, it's always the same start position, but now from here, with the right hand, it's 2 o'clock to 6 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, like that, okay? The third one is clockwise circles, so circles outwards, so for the left hand it would be anti-clockwise circles. And then the last one, and of course this one for the left hand would be 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock, okay? Then the last one is going to be internal circles. So this is anti-clockwise for the right hand and clockwise for the left hand, okay? So that's the first exercise that we do in this program, and you just do 1 set of each one of those. And these activation exercises, you've got to understand, you're not looking for muscle hypertrophy. You're not looking to create damage to the muscle fibers so that you get hypertrophied muscles. You're not looking for, strength improvements. You're looking for your central nervous system's ability to activate the muscles that control scapular stabilization, so the retractors and the depressors, mostly the lower traps here. And to be able to keep those muscles switched on whilst you're moving. That's what we're looking for here. And those muscles respond best to time under tension. So that's why we're not doing reps here, we're doing exercise that gives time under tension. So it's actually an isometric contraction for the scapular stabilizers, but because we create movement through the arms, it's quite a complex isometric contraction. Okay, now moving on to the second exercise. The second one that we're going to do today is, and again, if you've just tuned in, sing out, let me know where you are in the comments. Say hi so I can say hi to you when I get back in the studio. And also, any questions, put them in the comments so that I can answer them when I finish this demonstration. So the next one we need a medicine ball for. And what we're going to do is grab some dumbbells. If you're in America, so this is 1 kilo, I guess that'd be about 2 pounds. I'm sure you don't have 2.2 pound dumbbells in America. I'm sure you guys have, it goes up in 2 pounds or whatever it would be. But you're going to start very, very light. A lot of people do this and they go, oh yeah, I'm up to 7 or 8 kilos or, 18 or 20 pounds, and you're really getting it wrong. It's not about creating strength here with that much weight. Again, it's about activating the lower traps, and this is a more complex movement. So what I'm looking at here, maybe just film from over my back, Richie, so I can see it a bit better. What I'm looking for here is retraction and depression, and then as I row my arms, I actually externally rotate so that when I get to the point where I can't pull any further, the last thing that I'm doing is depressing my scapula like that. So a normal row would look like this, but what I'm doing here is as I retract and depress, I externally rotate, but at the same time focus on full on scapular depression like that. So I'll just do a couple of reps. And I hold it for 3 seconds at the end so that I'm getting that 1, 2, 3 time under tension. Nice and slow, focusing on the depression retraction, and external rotation. So again, if you don't understand, depression, retraction, and external rotation. But at the end of all of that, depression, retraction, depression, external rotation, once I can't go any further, so I'm pulling here, I'm rowing as far as I can go, the last thing that I do for the 3 seconds is full on depression so that you feel a burn down here. If you feel that one up here in the upper traps, you're doing it wrong. That's a telltale sign that you're doing it wrong. And when I was starting with this, I would get to, even with 1 kilo, I would get to like the 5th or 6th reps and I'd start feeling it here. And as soon as you do a rep where you start feeling it here, you have to do one of 2 things. You fully depress the shoulders and try and bring the feeling down into the lower traps, or you stop and start another rep. And as soon as you can't do any more reps without feeling it in the upper traps, then you've got to stop and rest and go for another set. So that's the second exercise, and we're going to do, you're going to aim for 10 to 12 reps on that one. And you gradually work up. Like when I do mine now, I'm on 4 kilos, so I guess that's about 9 pounds. And I've worked my way up from 1 kilo with that. And I went to 5, but I actually went back to 4 because I found that I wasn't able to control my scapula properly. And I'm pretty strong. I can lift quite a bit of weight. So we're not looking for a hell of a lot of weight here, okay? And the last 2 exercises that we're going to do in this workout is external and internal rotation for the rotator cuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to start right down here with the elbow against the ribs. When you're rehabilitating a shoulder, the first thing that you want to be aware of is that you want to remove complexity in the movements that you're doing, because the shoulder is a very complex joint. So if you're doing movements where you're going through shoulder flexion and abduction and like all these different movements, like let's say example with a chest fly, like that's a very complex movement. It's just too much for the shoulder. Also, anything that brings the shoulder, the arm above your head is going to cause problems. So what we're doing here is, the strategy is to start with strengthening the rotator cuff in a very safe position. And this, it couldn't be more safe. I mean, this is where your arm sits. So all you're doing is strengthening it in that area there. And again, the amount of weight that you lift is going to be dependent on how strong you are, but we're looking for very light weights, and we're going to be doing high repetitions to start with here. So we're going to be looking for sets of 20, and we're going to be doing 3 sets. And from here, what I'm doing is depressing and retracting the scapula. I'm going to offset myself a little bit on this angle, and then I'm going to externally rotate as far as I can go without moving my elbow, and then 3, 2, 1 on the way back. Hold it, 3, 2, 1 on the way back. Keeping the shoulder depressed and retracted, externally rotate, then 3, 2, 1. If the elbow comes off the ribs, it's too much weight. You need to lower the weight. Now, we don't have cable machines at Unity Gym, but what we do have is some of the world's best barbells that have a really beautiful spin to them. So all I've done here is just made up my own little shimmy cable machine. So just by getting the strap of a gymnastics ring, cutting it so it's a little bit shorter, and putting a weight through here, this is doing exactly the same job as a cable machine. But if you don't have access to any of that, one of these pieces of TheraTube band will do, and you can get these online. I'm sure Yanni can share a link in the description, but from here, it's exactly the same thing. TheraBand tubing's good. It definitely does the job, but it's not nearly as good as a cable because it doesn't have constant tension. The tension is greatest at the end, and I like to have constant tension, okay? Now the next one, oops, I just realized I set that up wrong, so I'm going to do it here. The next one is going to be internal rotation. Now the only thing here is, for external rotation, it's good to have the point where the cable is set a little bit lower than the elbow, so you can see that's just a tiny bit lower, because the nature of the way that my arm pulls, that works really well. Whereas with internal rotation, it's actually good to have that point a little bit higher. So let's just imagine that that was, look, I'll do it for you guys so you can see. If I just put that up to here, okay, this would be a lot better. So that's a better height for internal rotation, okay? Elbow against my ribs, and then pulling into internal rotation, 3, 2. That's even still too low. See how that's going down? That should be coming from up there, okay? Coming in, 3, 2, 1. In, 3, 2, one. Okay, let's go back into the studio, and what we're going to do, I'm going to reveal the biggest mistake that people make, and we're going to talk about this entire strategy, and I'm going to answer your questions. So please hit me up with your questions, and yeah, let's get into it. So I will answer everyone's questions, but I'm just going to talk about a couple of things to finish off what I needed to talk about, what I had planned. So the first thing that I want to talk about is everything that I've just done there are some of the, there's one last thing that I forgot to do, and I'll show it tomorrow, but we've done it a lot before, but I will definitely show it tomorrow, which is the Pec Minor Release. So releasing the Pec Minor with a physio ball, which is just laying on your chest, putting a physio ball into the Pec Minor and rolling it outward. And the reason why we do that is because not only do we want to strengthen the rotator cuff and strengthen the scapular stabilizers, but we also want to release the muscles that are most likely causing, that would cause shoulder impingement or cause the scapula to be sitting in an unfavorable position. Okay, so that's a big part of this strategy as well. But what we've done just there is, those are some of the most basic exercises that you can do that are very, very safe for shoulder rehabilitation. So I mean, in my case, I did a slap tear, I tore the supraspinatus, I had fluid in the bursa. It was a really nasty injury. And through this strategy that I'm sharing with you guys this week, I've made probably an 80% recovery. I think I'm almost ready for full activity. And in that time, not only have I made a really good recovery, but I've maintained my muscle mass in my upper body. I haven't lost muscle mass, and I've even built muscle in areas that I didn't have before, in parts of my shoulder, in muscles that I wouldn't have worked this much. And I'm very excited to see where it takes me, because in the past, every time I've had an injury, without a doubt, Yanni's the same, it makes us stronger and better than we were before. We get a deeper understanding of our body, and we go through a really massive transformation. So what you want to understand is that the rotator cuff strengthening in just internal and external rotation like that, it's a really nice, safe position. And this lower scapular stabilizer activation, again, really safe positions. Like my arm didn't ever go above my head in this workout, and doing exercises that are just retraining my body on how to use these muscles effectively. Because what happens when you have, and this is a really big insight for you guys, and this is, I'm leading into the biggest mistake that people make. What happens when you do a really traumatic injury in your shoulder is that the body forgets how to use systems that worked really well before the injury. In favor of repairing and protecting the shoulder, it forgets how to use muscles that are meant to stabilize the shoulder and keep the shoulder doing what it does. And then when you try and do something really simple, like just moving your arms above your head like this, like when I was in the early stages of my injury, if I moved my arms above my head like this, you should have seen my right shoulder went right up like that. It just, and I couldn't control it. The scapula just wasn't doing its job. The scapular stabilizers, sorry, not the scapula. The scapular stabilizers weren't doing their job and working to hold my shoulder where it was. And same with the rotator cuff. The rotator cuff forgets what it's meant to do. So what we're doing is we have to, at the most basic level, retrain the shoulder on how to do this. And this is the biggest mistake that people make. People do not understand how much work is required to rehabilitate a shoulder after a traumatic injury like a slap tear, like shoulder impingement that's caused torn rotator cuff, so many other injuries that you could have. The body has to remember how to use these systems properly, and that's the whole strategy that we're doing here. And this is where people really stuff it up. People do this stuff, they get shown by a physio or shown by someone like Yanni or me, and they do it for a couple of weeks, get bored with it, and then move into the stuff that they used to do. And your body is really, really good at figuring things out and figuring out how to do things, and it works around it, but you never reteach the shoulder how to move properly. And when you ask it to do really advanced stuff like any gymnastics rings work or handstands or anything like that later on down the track, it's not going to do it properly, and you're going to run into problems. And that's where people that can have shoulder injuries and then they work around it and they don't have any problems for 10 years, and then they start doing something new and bang, that shoulder gets injured again because it never learned how to control those critical systems that make the shoulder move healthily. So Hope that makes sense to you guys. Any questions, hit me up in the comments section now. And if you've just tuned in and you haven't told me where you're from, please say hi. Just write something in the comments section so I know where you're from and I can give you a shout out. And I'm going to get into these questions now. So let's have a look here. Yanni's asked, when did I hurt my shoulder? He needs to know for today's article. It would have been back in April, Yanni, that I heard it now. So Elite Lancer, is this the part where we learn about face pulls? Sorry, bro, I'm not sure which part you were referring to when you said that. Face pulls are a great exercise, but they're more advanced. And the reason why they're more advanced is because of the complexity of pulling your, abducting your arms like that whilst internally rotating and all the things that are going on. So you're internally rotating the arm with a face pull, you're depressing, retracting, and abducting. And also, so horizontal abduction and abduction is happening in the shoulder when you do a good face pull. And it's just far too complex at the early levels of rehabilitation, which is exactly one of the things that I just said about the insight, about the big thing that people get wrong is that they don't understand the amount of work that's required at the early stages to effectively rehab this, and they don't have the same amount of tools in the toolbox as someone like I do. Me does, and they just go straight to these really complex movements, and that has a lot of problems down the track. Karina, hey Karina, how are you? So only 45 minutes from your location, heading out towards. Oh, cool. Oh, Yanni's asking. Yanni must have asked where you were. So yeah, cool. You're gonna have to come and visit us one day, Karina. Yeah, Yanni said the same thing to you, Elite Lancer. I can see face pulls are good, but there's many other important movements to do before that. Ferro, I've hurt my shoulder many times. Yeah, dude, so many people have. So Elite Lancer, how important is stretching after these exercises? In all honesty, brother, it's more important before, because what you want to do, again, this is the whole strategy. So when you're normally doing strength training, you don't want to stretch muscles that you're going to be using in the strength training session before you do the strength training, because it weakens your strength potential. So we mobilize the joint, but we don't want to stretch the muscles. That's different with rehabilitation, because with rehabilitation, especially in the early stages, it's far less about strengthening the muscles and more about strengthening the nervous system's ability to control and activate the right muscles. That's what it's about. I already talked about, the way that the body switches off these systems that work really well to stabilize joints. So, for example, with the Pec Minor, you want to, because if the Pec Minor is tight, it's going to cause the scapula to protract and elevate and pull down like this. What we want to do is we want to mobilize or stretch the Pec Minor to mobilize the scapula so that the scapula can sit back where it's meant to, so that when you strengthen it, the body strengthens the scapula stabilizers to hold the scapula in the place that you want it. If you did your stretching at the end of the session, you wouldn't have that same result. I hope that answers your question. Are you from Vermont? Cool. Welcome, brother. Okay, let's have a look here. So, Stephen from Melbourne, welcome, brother. Thanks for tuning in. When does hanging from a bar become a good option for shoulder recovery? That depends on the severity of the injury. So hanging is a really, really good tool to have in the toolbox. But in any kind of, basically you need to work with a physiotherapist or a good practitioner, and you need to, if they tell you that overhead movement is not good for you at your stages of the injury, then hanging is not going to be good for you. I didn't do hanging with my injury for many, many months because it just wasn't the right thing for me to do. And hanging itself is very, very good, and I've only just started to reintroduce hanging. And in my opinion, based on my research, and let's remember I'm not a physiotherapist, so I'm not going to go head to head with any physiotherapists on this, but in my opinion, based on everything that I've learned, when you do reintroduce hanging for a shoulder injury, you want to do active hanging rather than passive hanging, because passive hanging can put strain on the joint in a way that, like, let's say, if all of the systems are, holding your shoulder in a position that is going to cause shoulder impingement when your arm goes above the head, then hanging is actually going to passive hanging is going to make that worse. But if you get into a position and do active hanging where you're actively pulling the shoulders down into depression, pulling the scapula into depression. That's going to dramatically reduce any risk of shoulder impingement, and it'll be, you'll have a greater effect from it. So this is one of those areas where I would say that when you do start introducing hanging, I would definitely do it actively rather than passively. Let's have a look here. Stephen, you're saying you want to get some kicking tutorials in the future. Yeah, sure thing, man. Definitely. Unfortunately, the inquiries for shoulders definitely got the better of us here. There was more interest in that, but I'm very happy to do some kicking tutorials in the future, absolutely. Unless anybody has got any more questions, I think that's it for today. Please, quickly, any last minute questions, put them in the comments. And otherwise, Richard wants some dancing tutorials. I think I can definitely do some dancing tutorials for sure. Otherwise, tune in tomorrow, because I promise you this week I am going to really deliver an amazing strategy. Today was very simple, very, very basic. Tomorrow onwards goes out of shoulder rehab, or rather into the more intermediate to advanced stages of rehab, and more into shoulder conditioning as well. So even if you don't have an injury, the stuff that we're going to be doing from tomorrow onwards is going to be very, very good just to condition your shoulders and make them as strong as possible. So hopefully I'll see you then. Hope you enjoyed that show. Thanks for tuning in, and I will catch you all tomorrow. Have a great day.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that
It's
far.
the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.